Hello and welcome to Fireplace Stories, brought to you by the Owen Sound and North Grey Union Public Library. I will be reading a story from the book, The Best Short Stories 2021, the O. Henry Prize Winners, edited by Chimamanda Ngozi Adiche. Scissors, by Karina Sainz Borgo, translated by Elizabeth Bryer. They reached Cucuta at midday. All of them, except the grandmother, were hungry. She lay back in the seat, her eyes fixed on the bus ceiling. When they started making these trips, old Herminia stopped eating, fearful that her daughter and granddaughter might abandon her on a back road near the border. She'd turn hunger into a form of self-protection. At first, they made the crossing only once a month. Now they did so every week. They left before first light. They came back after nightfall, with 3 small tomatoes, sometimes, or a packet of spaghetti that lasted at most 2 days. They boiled the spaghetti in salted water and ate it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. No matter what goods they managed to get a hold of, every trip made her ache to the bone. "We told you to stay home, Mama, but you never listen." Wheezed the old lady, chewing over her fears like she would some Chimo tobacco. "You're as stubborn as a mule," Coralia added as she rummaged around in her bag. She gave in to her daughter's nagging and handed Milagros an old sweet and a packet of tissues. Nothing else. They had eaten the last mandarins before reaching Capacho Veo. "Well, what do you want me to do? Stay home alone?" Herminia muttered. "You'll desert me when I least expect it, never to return." "Oh, don't talk nonsense, Mama." "How could we desert you, Abuelo?" piped up Milagros, Herminia's granddaughter, cradling a baby whose explosive screams kept on until the whole family felt shell-shocked. Herminia endured these expeditions with a deep-seated stoicism. She was a Chachira woman to the marrow. She had the reserved air of the Andean Paramo, bowed legs and hair pulled into a modest bun. Anyone who had seen her a few years ago wouldn't recognize her now. She'd lost so much weight that her face had collapsed like a popped balloon, the damaged version of the one she'd presented to the world back when she held the reins of her life and the lives of everyone around her. Now she looked nothing like the rotund woman whom the neighborhood children had called Arepa Face. Herminia used to resemble the little corn cakes she had baked and sold from her corner store, which a group of soldiers set alight during a student roundup. Nobody footed the bill for the damages. Ever since, the years had come down on her like a mudslide, until they had buried her entirely. Herminia was not a sweet woman, and if she had been once, she no longer remembered such a thing. She seldom laughed, and her poplin dresses lent her a rocky, severe look, as if she had donned a curtain rather than clothing. Her husband, Antonio, had died 10 years before. One day, in the early hours of the morning, his heavily loaded truck lost control around a curve on the Trans-Andean Highway. It plowed off a cliff and into the rocks below. She never dressed in black, though anyone would say she was born with the face of a widow. The old woman's life had not been easy, but she wasn't one to complain. Her mother and grandmother never had, so why should she be the first to do so? "Abuela, take the baby while Mama and I go take care of something," her granddaughter said, brazen as ever. "Don't move from this spot, you hear?" "Yes, mija, I heard." Herminia wheezed and took the child into her arms. She didn't much care for minding her, but had learned to see the act as life insurance. Having the baby meant that she herself was safe. She was convinced that this was the only reason they would come back for her. She had heard the stories. Before leaving the country for good, families abandoned the elderly. They left them to their luck on the steps of a hospital with nothing but a blanket and a bottle of water. It was the way the elderly died on that side of the border, soaked in fear and asking when their children would come get them. The old lady looked at the sky, imploring a bolt of lightning to make Santander Park vanish. At that time of day, it was full of pigeons and draggers, the name everyone on the border gave to the men and women who engaged in barter trade, dragging potential clients by the sleeve. Like the pigeons, the draggers had an unsightly, flea-ridden air, and just as the pigeons pounced on cigarette butts, there were no longer any bread for them to feed on, the draggers fought over the desperate individuals prepared to exchange their back teeth for a few pesos. Coralia and Milagros disappeared down the street. It took them 10 minutes to get to Los Guerreros hair salon. It was a filthy place, bedecked with clippings from 80s fashion mags, teased hairstyles, purple eyelids, vests with bacteria patterns, out-of-date outfits. People were lining up out the door, not to get their hair styled, but to sell it. We'll give you 60,000 pesos for yours, a little less for your mother's, a woman said when finally it was their turn. But my hair's long too, said Coralia. It's not as shiny, and we only use hair of the finest quality for our wigs. Coralia lowered her gaze while the hairdresser held a strand between thumb and forefinger. It's dry and vitamin deficient. The ends are split, said the woman. Well, that's it, said Coralia. Do you want it or not? If we take the full length, it will be 20,000 pesos. Only 20,000? And I'm giving you a good price. Mama, quit haggling, Milagros interrupted. If we add it to my 60,000, we'll have 80. That's not bad. You're right, Hia. It's not bad. It's terrible. Listen, lady, you can go away and think about it if you want. I can't stand around all day waiting for you to make up your mind. Well, I want to, even if she doesn't, said Milagros, not wanting their trip to go to waste. Put this on. The woman handed her a black salon cape. And take a seat over there. I'll go get a hairdresser. Are you sure you want your hair cut off, Hia? Coralia murmured. It's just hair, Mama, and attached to my head, it's not going to buy anything at the market. Coralia looked at her daughter as if she were waiting for her at the other end of a long tunnel. Then she pulled her hair up in a ponytail and went to find the woman who had made the lowball appraisal. She came back soon after holding a black cape flecked with dye stains and took a seat next to her daughter. There were still 12 people ahead of them. The place seemed more like a barracks than a hair salon. There were no mirrors or basins, only a row of plastic chairs where women waited their turn to get shorn. The hairdressers were hardly worthy of the title. They cut off hair, period. They approached, comb in hand. They detangled sections, then sunk the scissors in. They cropped as close to the scalp as possible so as not to let a single centimeter go to waste. When finally it was their turn, mother and daughter knew by heart the sound of the blades when they came into contact with their hair. A snip, snap, a removal. tearing out things to sell to whoever will pay up. They felt like turning and running or crying. They did neither, only waited. Old Herminia was nervous. It was almost 6 o'clock and the sun was starting to retreat, timid in the dusk of the border city. The baby was asleep, worn out from all the crying. Hunger was like that. Once you got used to it, it numbed any impulse. Where had all the things that once seemed lasting gone? Herminia wondered, surrounded by the filthy pigeons. Coralia and Milagros appeared. Herminia recognized them by their clothing. From afar, they looked skinny and withered, advanced into old age well before their time. She removed her glasses and cleaned them with her dress, wanting to make them out more clearly. Coralia had no hair, and Milagros sported only the fuzz of a skinny chicken. They looked as if they were returning from war, not the market. They had 2 packets of pasta in hand, which they put into the backpack without a word.